Welcome, everybody. We have another game dev roundtable discussion for tonight. It's been once again a bit of like moving the heavens to try and get these scheduled, but we finally got at least a crew together for tonight to kind of catch up and talk a little bit about game dev and what we've been up to in 2024. So I'll give everyone a chance to once again reintroduce themselves. So we'll start with Tony and then go down to Tomo.
Hi, Tony Barnes. I make games. I've made games for going on 4 decades now. Did a lot of franchises that people probably know or hopefully know or maybe don't know. Like your Maddens, your Desert Strikes, your Striders, your Medal of Honor, all that fun stuff. Legacy Kane. I always forget that one too. And 4 years ago, quit the evil rat race of the AAA and to become, big eye independent, not necessarily indie, but independent. And doing my thing with Retro Ninja, which is kind of like I need a better catchphrase, but kind of new school cooking, old school flavor. And that's what I'm doing. So, if I look distracted during this and all this, it's because I'm doing that while doing this.
All right, and to Tomo.
And I can attest when talking to Tony that he's almost always working on something. That's been a consistent truth. Yeah, my name is Tomo Moriwaki. I've been making games for not as long as Tony has. I think I might have started my 26th year sometime recently. And my claim to fame is being the creative director of the Spider-Man 2 project in 2004. And since then and along the way, worked on a number of console titles up until around 2011 or so. Then did some contracting and consulting, and then in 2014 started Hyperkinetic Studios, which has been a decade of client work plus a game that was where we bit off more than we could chew in the form of Epic Tavern that's on Steam Early Access presently. May come out of it this year or early next. And I guess that's how I've been navigating since the beginning of the pandemic, is just in work for hire gigs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, again, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, you definitely know who I am. By the time you're watching this, I should have already left and come back from my trip. I'm heading out to MagWest in San Jose to give a talk about the indie market and how to study indie games and give a whole new generation of gamers and developers like PTSD about how their games are going to succeed or not. But we'll see how well that talk goes. But it's great to have both of you on. We've been talking about trying to do something together for pretty much this entire year, and we finally got going almost at near the end of it. But I guess to kind of like catch things up, how's things been? I guess like game dev wise for both of you, because again, it's been a while since we've especially like Tomo and I. The last time we've chatted was like what, like I think what was like April or May of this year, or even earlier than that.
That sounds about right. Yeah. I can start. It's interesting. Lately, there's been a lot of small projects that I've been involved in, and a lot of weird projects. I feel like it's less and less games. Although I did start teaching level design at Pasadena Art Center last in January, and I just started the second class yesterday. Yesterday was my first class, and that's cool. It helps me kind of. I think the teaching is better for organizing my own thoughts than it is for the students. I did just recently go to animation conference in Guadalajara called Pixelatl, and gave a design presentation there. And it's always nice to be, well, first to see the animation pros that they bring in to do the serious talks for animation. I'm a big fan of Scavenger's Reign, and I sat next to one of the people that worked on that project briefly. and all the young people and their excitement. Although I think now that business cards have been replaced with stickers, at least for artists.
That's good to
I did
know.
notice a lot of stickers going around. They still cards are weird to me. I would have thought they would have all been replaced by now. But yes, I did. Go to cons or whatever, like Comic-Con, and my kids are old enough to start like working and going to cons, and they're all about stickers too, which is like so bizarre. Stickers, but whatever.
That is good for me to know because I was thinking about whether or not I wanted to print out more business cards for my trip next week. It's good to know that everyone is finally moving away from them.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
yeah.
you can also just have LinkedIn with the QR code just up on your phone. So you just open it up and just go, yeah, take a picture of this.
Yep.
That could work too.
That was actually a thing. Yeah, I mean, GDC was like a million years ago, or a few months ago, depending upon what planet you live on. But there was a lot of that going on, a lot of QR LinkedIn action going on, which was kind of cool. It was also interesting because it's like I get home and all of a sudden I have all these LinkedIn requests. I'm like, who the hell are these people? What? But yeah, I guess I'm up. I mean, I kind of like I said, I started my own thing, in 2020. I make very polished prototypes that make people think that they're done games because because then they look at my prototype and they're like, it's done, it's not out, and it's because it's just a prototype. I just happen to make pretty earlier than sometimes earlier than I should, but whatever. So what am I doing? I have a physics-based puzzle platformer, kind of an homage to Marble Madness, called BPM Boy, and I'm going to be releasing that soon. I'm not sure when this will come out, so it might actually be released by the time it comes out. And that'll be on Steam. It was out on the Atari VCS, which most people don't know what that is, but it's a console. It's at a it's a console at about a Xbox One level of performance, mostly focused on niche retro market, and they tend to like what I make because I make modern retro. So, BPM Boy is a physics-based platformer. I have another game that's a physics-based top-down isometric shooter called Polygunner. That will be up next. And because like I said, I'm constantly working, or like Tomo said, I'm constantly working. I also have another thing that hasn't really been announced, but here's like a scoop or something. It's like a first-person shooter, I guess. A boomer, I guess kids would call them nowadays. But it's not like it's not like Swarm Lake or Dust or one of those where you're 50 feet in the air and moving at 45 miles an hour the entire time. It's a little more down to earth, less verticality, but definitely about positioning and threat prioritization. Like I like games, especially if, like, say, they're shooting or combat games, where when you come into the situation, the arena, the encounter, I like them when the game challenges me to decide who it is that I should destroy first, right? So, and I play lots of games, and I feel like that isn't an art that's being cultivated out there. I love Destiny 2. Destiny 2, whatever you want to call it. To me, it's just 10 years of Destiny, whatever. The through the gun feel is amazing, right? Your maneuverability, I think, is amazing. But their encounters are soft as a baby's ass. And to me, it's a testament of the shooter mechanics that I'm willing to put up with really like just spawn vomit. That it's not all of it, but most of it is just like spawn vomit. These aren't really like the environments and the way that the characters come at you. They're not really setups. They're not really encounters that seem to have like staging and things to challenge you. It's more about who has the highest DPS and where can you hide when they hurt you a lot. And so I'm like, well, you know what I would like? I would like to play a game that was like that, where I walk into a room and that I go, that guy needs to be killed first because that guy is going to give me the most trouble while I'm chewing through and feeling all happy with these itty bitty little guys. So I should probably figure out how to maneuver to him and kill him first, right? So that's how I approach it. It's like, I like to play an FPS like that. I think I'll make an FPS like that. Just like I like to play a top-down physics-based platformer, that's like this. There isn't one. Okay, I'll just make it. Anyway, it's my long-winded what I'm doing right now.
I think one of the greatest versions of that kind of game is Serious Sam.
Mm.
It might be the best since, because you're right, because no one's sort of taken it forward. And I would say though that Helldivers 2 is a very strong honorable mention.
Yeah. Yeah, Helldivers does definitely. Helldivers 2 especially. I think that Helldivers 1, I spent more time worrying about friendly fire and things coming down on my head than I do in Helldivers 2, even though the thread is the same and it's largely the same game, just refined and changed view.
Maybe it's because it's easier to avoid that friendly fire in a 3D environment, sort of.
Yeah, I think so.
Friendly fire is definitely those guys' forte, though. They've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. I didn't play the little wizard thing that they made.
Magicka's
but
hilarious.
I assume it's the same. From what everyone's told me is that kind of the same core principles. And stuff,
Yeah. Don't cross the streams because of friendly fire. They also their first expansion for Magicka was called Magicka Vietnam, and they gave the wizards M60s. It was ridiculous. Their sensibilities, their comic sensibilities are outstanding.
And don't forget they had a surfing bird in the big trailer reveal for that.
Oh, actually though, Tony, you have to play Space Marine 2.
Yeah, I know. I've been looking at it for a minute, but yeah, the more I see, and here's the interesting thing. Okay, so this is kind of a topicless ramble, but I think that this is actually a good nugget to chew on for a minute. Is I'm noticing a little bit of a trend where gamers and gaming pundits are talking about games like Space Marine 2, and they're referring to rather nostalgically the 360 era. Now, for me, in my head, that isn't that long ago, right? So it's like this bizarre thing that they're really romanticizing, that the PS3 360 era as this bygone era. But yeah, I guess so. So, and I realize that like a lot of them are talking about the kind of cadences we did back then, and kind of what I'm talking about with setups. I feel like there were more encounters that were very staged back then, and all that kind of stuff, and like progression was quite a bit more linear, whether it was open or not. All of these things that aren't on the forefront of designers and game developers' minds now, right? Nowadays it's about how do we create something that's sticky? How do we create something that monopolizes the time? Which is really funny because a good 20 years ago, I remember having a discussion um, with my boss and saying, I don't care how they play. I mean, here are the mechanics, here's the world. I don't care how you play. I don't care what you do as long as I have your time. I said time is the commodity that I want.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure that people are playing my game. And this is talking about, because I make primarily single player linear action adventure things. And it was like, but I said, I want your time. I want people to be playing my game and play it all the way through. And I don't want them to travel off to the next game, right? And that was like probably a good 20 years ago. I had that thought. And of course, my managers were like, time, who cares, whatever, just get their money and go. Now it's like, time is the commodity. Time is the currency that people are all trying to monopolize. And now I'm like, look, I don't need all of your time because I'm not generating, or I'm not even going to remotely make games like that. I don't want you to be my ATM machine. I don't want to monopolize your time. We're not getting married. We're just dating, right? I just want to make something that entertains you for a bit, and if you come back to it, then that's great. I want you to be entertained, and I want you to feel like you got value out of it. And the only thing that I really want out of it is brand loyalty. For I guess is the term. I want you to feel like, oh, okay, Tony Barnes, Retro Ninjas spit out another game. I don't know what it is because he's crazy and seems to do a different genre every time. But I don't care. I just want to, I want to play the next one, right? That's the only things that I'm focused on. I'm not focused on generating anything that's procedural that will, like I said, eat up all of your time. And I mean, if I did that, I would lean into it and it would be great. No, or it wouldn't be like trying to milk you. It would be something that actually I would hope would provide value. But it's not where my head's at right now. My head's at generating something that is fun, isn't like heroin. Like I said, we're dating, we're not getting married. So if you play it for 5 minutes or you play it for 5 hours, as long as you feel like you got the value out of it and you're interested in the next thing, then I did my job, right? But yeah, like part of that is, I guess, bringing back old school sensibilities. What gen was that anyway? Xbox and like 360, and was that fifth, sixth gen?
I think 360 is called sixth generation. So
Yeah.
I mean, I like describing it as the golden era of the PS2, right before all the genres disappeared.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two like really good points were like brought up. Like one, like speaking about like good like feel and like movement for a shooter, I would definitely recommend Sulaco that I've been going through. That one has been really fantastic in terms of just like really elevating. Like it's built entirely in GZ Doom and plays like nothing like a GZ Doom style shooter.
True.
And
Actually, that is one that yeah, like, I don't want to say if you like Sulaco, you'll like the thing I'm making because they're not the same, but it's in that, it's in that range where it's like Sulaco isn't about backflips, bullet time, and like I said, 50-foot jumps, and those games are great too. But it is about, instead of it being like this, it being like this, your kind of field of action is narrowed down to kind of what's in front of you. But it's about being, it's so visceral and it's so fast. And I'm like, yeah, I want that, but I also want like setups that people can can feel. They understand, that there is a rhyme behind the reason. It's a little more, I want to use the word tactical, because then you start having visions of Rainbow Six and whatnot. But it is a little more tactical than your average boomer.
Well, is it rooms or puzzles, right?
To me, yeah.
Yeah.
They're just action puzzles.
Sort
and,
of like an extension of the original Doom gameplay that they maybe stumbled upon, but definitely could have gone further, and many people could have gone further in the decades since.
Yeah, like, I don't know if either one of you played Trepang 2 that came out, I think it was either this year or last year. It was supposed to be like a big homage to Fear. And like that game just like went like really into like the whole slow-mo bullet time. And to me, it just felt like a little like too chaotic to play. Like I'm sure there's an interesting discussion there about like how like the difference in like gunplay and feel can lead to two like very different experiences. Like when I try to play Trepang 2, it's kind of like I step out, 7 shotguns all like hit me in unison from all over the place. And it just felt like it was entirely bound on like the whole act of bullet time. And you really couldn't do anything else unless you were like super god gamer. You have actual Neo powers in real life that you can respond at that speed. Whereas with like to both your points about like Sulaco and like the idea, like, is it more of a puzzle, like that kind of like action puzzle mentality to it? Like, I got like one of the things I really love about Sulaco is this idea that there's multiple ways of approaching things. Like, it didn't feel like, oh, I step around the corner, I'm dead. It's okay, I can slide around, maybe take out a commander, maybe I throw grenades, set up a mines, and there's that point, like, I was reading like I was reading some of the forum discussions about like there were people complaining that they felt that the game was too easy. Like there were like in the sense that, well, I can throw a grenade or use a sniper or use a pistol. Like why can't it be more limiting? And I think that kind of gets away at like good feel. Like it should feel like the player has the power to approach things differently. And maybe that's just kind of like one of the reasons why I just never got into a lot of the fighting games in particular. Like fighting games have always felt very like restrictive to me in that respect. That if I don't memorize combo lines, if I don't memorize special moves, that I'm basically dead. I've been eyeing people playing the new Marvel vs. Capcom collection, like watching them go experience a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for the first time. Like, part of me thinks that looks fantastic, and then the other part of me thinks, like, I will never be able to learn a game like that in my entire life.
Well, it's definitely the kind of game where you have to do it the way the game demands that you do it to succeed. I mean, it's hard for a fight game not to be that, right? You're not allowed to say, I want to play Dark Souls, but I want to do it my way. But I think it just depends on the kind of game that's being made, right? The developer's allowed to make a game that's all about bullet time. That's great. But we can also sort of talk about what are some of the common rules that you want to see done right in a given shooter, right? And so there is some concept of clarity, of I understand what's going on. I guess it's true of every game, maybe or every interaction, but like understanding the setups and what is there, what is the enemy composition, what their layout is, and that you have an answer to that question. What are you going to do about me? And maybe many answers, so so you feel like you have some freedom, so you won't feel as limited, right? That feeling of being limited, but that feeling of being limited can't be taken away if there isn't enough clarity. And so, and granted, pacing could, like, many a game could have better pacing.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I have yet to ship a game where I've been 100 on every level as far as pacing or resources, i.e. how difficult something is. But I think I have a pretty good a pretty good ratio. I was actually playing Medal of Honor 2010 again the other day. I haven't played it for light years, and I can tell. I hate to be like this, but I can tell the levels that I really like homed in on, and kind of sat with the designer more than the ones that I didn't. Um, I think for a lot of players, it's kind of a wash. There's an ebb and flow, but for me, I'm like, why did that just happen? I would never let that happen. Why did I let that happen? Because I obviously let that happen because it's in the game. Yeah, like if it like especially in the case of Medal of Honor, there's very little that didn't pass by my nose on that one, just because of the nature of how the development went. And I'm like, why is this like this? God, what happened? Oh yeah, okay. And then I start remembering what production was like, and then I go, oh yeah, okay. Now I remember why this is like this. Um,
Well,
it
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
it's interesting because like um and it's no slight on people I've worked with, but not everything that's in my head or in the head of every lead or creative director is in the head of everyone that's working with them, and that's good and bad. The great part about it is that then so you get stuff that's in their head. And you're like, oh, perfect. All right, that's awesome. Here's how to synthesize it. And then you also get stuff where it's like, oh my God, no, or why weren't you thinking of that? Um, and so it's this balance when you're working on something of getting everybody to try and nudge them to think beyond whatever it is that they did before, or to embrace what they're bringing that elevates the game. And it's this constant juggle of that with the downward pressure of the time ticking on the development schedule and all that fun stuff.
Well, in the context of Medal of Honor, I feel like the stuff we didn't pay as close attention to just happens faster, and that's the problem. Like,
Mm-hmm.
at least one thing you can generally say is the old school sensibilities in console were really fast, and we've moved on. Everyone has moved on, right? That accommodating someone that wants to ADHD rush through everything except for the pressing of buttons to like shoot guys.
Mm-hmm.
Those games are not that common.
Yeah.
Although Vampire Survivors works, I'd say. In terms of drop in fast, keep the action high. But a first person shooter isn't necessarily the best action platform. It's a good platform for a hybrid of action and spatial analysis, visual storytelling, and other kinds of storytelling. It's this. It's just a more interactive version of a certain type of TV show.
Right.
And once we
Or
recognize
the
that,
movies that we're up on,
yeah,
since we're
exactly.
Gen X.
And I think once we recognized that, I think it became obvious how much pacing mattered. How much pacing sort of just made it. I mean, sometimes it just made it normal.
Right.
But
remember, he who shall not be named, our executive producer, would sometimes sit in on design meetings and whatnot, and so for those that don't know, Tomo and I worked together on Medal of Honor 2010. That's where we met, and that's where I met the amazing designer who I have the utmost respect for. And no offense to a lot of the other designers I work with, but not many people I've worked with understand the correlations of zeros and ones to emotion, and that emotion actually is something that you should be aware of and be I want to say manipulating because that's a mean word, but you should be
But
utilizing.
it's the right word. It's the
I
right
know it.
word.
I know it's the right word. The problem is that the world is filled with like skepticism and negativity. They take everything as negative now, but but it's like a roller coaster. There has to be ups and downs, and people always say that, and they nod their head, and then they'll show you a chart or something that they saw on Wikipedia or something, going, yeah, it should go have up and downs, and that's the extent of it. They don't actually understand that it really should have peaks and valleys. Um, and we were having this discussion, this design discussion about the crescendo of a level in Medal of Honor. And I said, okay, so what we need to do is we started assigning each encounter a number, an intensity number, right? It's an intensity number, but the executive producer instead just thinks of numbers as, value, right? So I said we need to bring this down. We were just at like an 8 or a 9, and the crescendo has to be a 10, right? So there's no headroom for it to be a 10. So we need to bring this down. And I'm like, we should bring it down to like a 4 or a 3. And he interjects with, so you want something that's a 3 in your game? And I'm all, yeah, that's the intensity level. And like in his brain, it's, you want something low quality because he's a simpleton. So,
And they often, you want to. It's like you want to take it easy. You want to take a break, and it's
you have to take a break. There's no way that you can just keep escalating. Right? At some point, people become numb to it, and there's no way that you can go from a 7 or an 8 and then expect 5 minutes later to actually hit a 10. Like
if
you can
go
hit
to 10 after, it's just +3, right?
Right.
And you're trying, and you prefer +7.
Exactly. So that's why it was like, okay, everything needs to fizzle down to nothing. To like nothing, and we had this thing called Jawa Canyon as a phone, and I remember a designer sitting in the meeting going, so you want me to make a thing where like you're just shooting at nothing, or like things take pot shots at you but you can't shoot them back and there's only a handful of them? You want it to be like scary or something? And I'm all, yes I do. That's exactly. I'm glad that you understand. Which he didn't understand. He just thought I was an idiot.
But also scary and kind of calm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it, because intensity is just a magnitude. What's the character of that intensity? So we wanted it to be chill and maybe creepy more than scary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we wanted heart rate to go down.
Yeah.
If anything, to feel like you wished you could do more. Right, that you, I think what even says with that, like one of your NPC squad mates says something like wanting to rush after them.
Yep. Yeah, and I was like, no, get back here, Hernandez. Yeah. Really scary that I remember these names and all that stuff. I thought I'd flushed it from my brain.
Lance's voice was awesome. I'm sad that we replaced it.
I am too. Lance was our art director, and he had this perfect for jarhead booming voice, and we really should have kept it, but it was like the whole thing of unions and all this stuff, and of course, and
voice acting.
Yeah, and the fact that a lot of executives in places don't have respect. Like the reality is they don't have respect for the people that work for them. Like they don't look at them and go, "Oh, you can be and." Right? They don't look at it and go, you can do something and you can do something else, right? So the execs were like, why would we have Lance? He's not a voice actor. And it's like, but he is, because he's nailing this part. And he brings the exact energy, flavor, the kind of disdain that he would have in some of the things that he was said. The voice actor that's in the game did a fine job and everything, right? But the resonance that was in our art director's voice, Lance, really like hit.
Well,
And so it's a little different in the actual
like
final.
in the military vibe, right? When the sergeant or commanding officer says something like "Go, go, go," right?
Mm-hmm.
That version of "Go, go, go" in my head it's always Lance's voice now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did a great job. And yeah, I do wish we hadn't replaced him. But yeah, it and you know, I can say all this because it panned out. You know, the encounter is Belly of the Beast. For anybody that's wondering, you get off the Chinook, all hell breaks loose. Oh, and the intro into that is just, and again,
A
like
lot of work.
I'm biased, but that entire stretch of the game is freaking amazing. Like, I'm sorry, but it is. Like the Chinook ride in, the dialogue in there, like there's this great part, and we don't like we don't spend a lot of effort just hyper focusing on little lines and little things, but there's a part where one guy goes to another guy and goes, go switch places with me. I've seen this movie, you know, because there's a guy that's towards the front of the towards the back of the Chinook where you know you're going to deploy first. Um, and it's just a little throwaway line the way it's done. It's not like everything stopped and everybody focused on him saying that and we watched some guys trade. No, the camera is just moving and people are just talking, and it's very fluid. And you come out and all hell breaks loose, and we break loose and we're just hammering you with hell until we're not, right? And people thought that that was intense. And then we take it down and we ratchet the intensity up a little more and we ratchet a little more, and we actually introduce a mechanic that for some people I think they thought was really too simple. As a matter of fact, in Warfighter they made the door breach more elaborate, but it was purposefully, besides the resource that we had, it was purposely simplistic, and it happens a certain number of times at a certain cadence in that whole encounter for a specific reason. It's so that you become complacent with it.
Yeah, we
You
didn't have a door breach mechanic, right? We
Right.
used door breaches as sort of cinematic gating.
Yes, um, and so you you know, you go through an encounter. You besides the bullets, the way that we tuned it, and Tomo did an excellent job sitting down with our programmers and making sure that through the gun and everything worked really great, and how you get hit works really great. But besides bullets, which are soft, you know, soft locks, the breaches in this case were hard locks. And like I said, they're at a certain cadence, and it's such a benign action on purpose. You know, it's press F for respect or whatever, right? You know, you go up the door, you hold down the button, guy kicks in the door. You know, maybe there's something there, maybe there's not, right? But most of it's pretty passive, right? That's on purpose. That's so that you actually become complacent about the act of opening up the door, and until something happens, and it's not, and so that's about, you know, the pacing of it is lulling the player in playing on their expectations. You know, bring the intensity, you know, down, shit it up a little, make you think that this mechanic is dumb. I've done it a bunch of other times. Here I go doing it again, and then all of a sudden, holy shit! And from the holy shit moment of breaching the door, it's just go. The other fun part of that was sitting there and saying, okay, this is how long it goes, right? And generally, when I'm making something, I have an idea, you know, based upon you know, whatever experience and all that fun stuff. But really, you gotta you know, touch the metal. You gotta play it. So I would just play, and I would imagine, even with it not being fully implemented, just imagine, okay, I'm doing this, and basically sat there with a timer, and as soon as it became really tiresome to be in the encounter, then I added 10 seconds more. um, and so the way the encounter plays out is it goes for a while, And people who were reviewing were like, this goes on for too long. And I said, it goes on for just long enough. Like, they're like, but it goes on for too long. I don't want to be doing this this long. And I'm all, no. The point of this encounter isn't shoot the mans. You've been shooting the mans a whole lot already. The point of this encounter is to make you think you're going to die. We're going to kill you. Because in COD, they killed you, right? And so gamers who are introduced to that as a mechanism in first-person shooters as part of the narrative that you will die. And I was like, okay, let's.
Now we're way beyond pacing too here, by the way, right? We are trying to basically influence the player and while making assumptions about what they think and trying to shift their thinking away from what we're actually going to do the whole level until we don't. And in our play tests, it worked fabulously.
Yep.
Like we nailed the landing so hard on that one.
That entire stretch. I mean, honestly, even before that, basically after the first two levels, there's a huge stretch of the game that I consider just first-person gold. And most people don't even know it because they just were dismissive of this COD clone. That's just so well.
Plenty of people remember, dude. Every now and then I'll run into somebody and they'll have played it and they remember.
I remember being told I had to abandon the concept of a fallback, of a retreat, because nobody's going to retreat. Everyone will just keep pushing forward and shooting. And I said, we can make it work, but the rest of the game has to work. So, like, I would talk about the performance of the AI, your allies, and I said it has to be consistent. So, like, if you actually really look at Medal of Honor 2010, you're pretty much always with another ally, and generally with three. And each of those three have a personality. They each fit an archetype. One sticks close to you, or basically goes where I would like you as a player to go. The other one hangs back a little more and is more cautious, and all of his, even the dialogue is like that. And then there's the hothead that's generally forward. And you can go join them and all that fun stuff. But usually you're going to take more heat being that far forward. So what it also, and them being consistent in their positioning and their talking, even though those three allies shift characters, those three archetypes are throughout the whole game. By them being consistent, you buy into it. You buy into where you're supposed to be, kind of who you're supposed to be near, who you feel best about, and being near, and what kind of heat, i.e., let's call it dynamic level difficulty. Where you want to be in the mix, and so when you get to a level where they're like, screw this, and they break and they run past you and they run behind you, for a lot of people there was like a split second of what's going on, and a lot of other people were like, holy crap, and they bailed with them because they knew that all of a sudden all of the heat was on them. The guys that give you ammo, because that's another, like, by them giving you ammo, it makes you value them, even if you don't care about their performance and their character. If you actually were immersed and care about their character, them saying, even the hothead saying, break, that's it, we got to go, then you're like, oh, shit, I got to go. And that's one of the mechanisms that actually made the ability to force players to retreat, even though
convince players.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you don't retreat, eventually,
it's true.
Eventually, yeah. And actually, there's stuff. So you become their focus. Their aim actually algorithmically becomes more accurate over time, and after a certain amount of time that you didn't break, then we start spawning RPG guys. They just pop up out of nowhere, and just start shooting hell at you. So it becomes quite obvious. And I really, watching people play and everything, I think it worked. And that's one of those things that, like, you can't get that from a procedurally driven game that's built to be a cash register, that's built to be this sandbox, repeatedly played, grind fest. And again, like I said, Destiny's one of my favorite games, so I play sandbox repeat. I play it, but you don't get that from those type of games.
I think that a comparison can be drawn between, I would say like the campaign missions in Destiny 2 for the Witch Queen. I think it's like one of the best campaigns for a single player ever made. But if you were to then go back and compare it to the kinds of things that happen in Call of Duty 4 during its single player campaign, and maybe people could argue whether some missions were better or worse, but obviously it was memorable. And more importantly, what you see is that there was a lot more nuance in the individual enemy behavior. Right? There's a lot more kind of like, it's easy to miss, but there's a lot of care taken to kind of craft all these sort of individual movements that are happening, all these enemies taking up positions at right times under different circumstances. And I mean, I'm also drawing a comparison between what really probably represents the oldest school, most hardcore first-person shooter single-player campaign designer guy, who's fills that Radiant level with like thousands of freaking triggers and all those lines, and probably what you see in the Destiny levels, which is streamlined and almost certainly has a more elegant relationship with the features that spawn enemies, and has like a sort of maybe a more reasonable sense of leaving the AI to do what it's supposed to do and putting them in situations where they do what they do well. Whereas I think, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like old school first-person shooter single-player mission designers, they are always trying to make bad guys do what they're not supposed to do, pretty much the whole time.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked with quite a few designers over the time on shooty shoots, even though I've only worked on a few FPSs, but some third-person shooty shoots and stuff. And my best people were always breaking AI, figuring out some entity or some script that the lead programmer was like, "What are you doing? Why'd you do that? How'd you do that?"
It's straight misuse of the tool, man, and I remember doing it myself plenty.
Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, Spider-Man 2 is probably a really good culmination of something that wasn't really supposed to do, but you just pushed through and made it happen.
Yeah, well, and there were too many humongous systems that had to be built, so there was a lot of cracks in between, right? And we had to improvise to fill those cracks. A good example of that is one line function called passing wind. Sorry, maybe it was 3 lines. Sorry, it initializes the sound of wind and plays it at 0 volume, and then changes, interpolates towards a target that is set by your current speed, and that target is its volume, and that's it. That's all it does. It's sloppy as hell because it instantiates a sound that's literally going to play 100% of the time the game is running, and when you go faster, the wind sound gets louder. That's it. But that's definitely using whatever we had at our disposal to get the effects we wanted.
That's funny.
Because you would think, like, that would get implemented in a more normal way, right? But there's just a script function at the beginning of the level constructor that's pasted into.
That's funny. I'm in my first-person platformer, Run Die Run Again, which I should probably finish one day.
Nice.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I am literally playing a wind sound all the time, and I ramp up the volume and the pitch depending upon your velocity. Um, that is exactly what I'm doing, because it was the easiest way to get that kind of, you know, traveling vibe, and especially by just um, basically hard coding it to your velocity. I didn't have to come up with some sort of new like audio, algorithm for things like when you're falling. So you're running,
Oh, it just works all
you
the
get a
time.
little
Yeah,
bit of that, right? And as you fall, you start hitting velocities that you could never actually hit when you're actually just running. And so it just works. It just starts ramping, it ramps the volume up to just an obnoxious level. And like I said, pitch is in there a little too. So it just goes louder, 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 and then actually starts like it pitches up, and then it hits it's on a more of a curve. So it actually, like when you start falling, it'll get lower, not in volume but in pitch, because when you're, I don't know if you ever stick your head out of a car window, but it doesn't sound like a whistling when you stick your head out. It sounds like a whistling when you crack the window, but as soon as you stick your head out, it's like, so it kind of, and it just manages itself like that. But yeah, I am totally, wasting CPU time and everything by playing it all the time. There's a lot of things that probably are like that. I think people don't understand um, that games are like that. I saw a discussion on Twitter, X, whatever, the today, where people were saying that this Resident Evil style game called Hydrophobia that came out on the PlayStation 2, I think, or something. It's like 14 years ago or something. Beautiful water, right? Great looking water, because you're on a ship and the ship is taking on water and all that stuff. So they spent a lot of time and effort on the water sim. Um, and then there's comparisons and bitching and moaning about the water and Star Wars Outlaw sucks. Ubisoft, they had 400 people and all this time and all this money, and they keep throwing around numbers that really, like, people need. I want the player to understand how the sausage is made. I don't want them to weaponize these things against us, right? So it's like, don't guess that there's 400 people. There might have been 400 people, but more than likely, that's just a bullshit credits list. You look at the credits list of Strider 2014. I think that Moby says there's like 100 something people that worked on it. I can tell you right now, there were 22 people. 22 people who I will go into a foxhole again with, that made that game. The rest of those names, I don't know those names. Those are just names that were attached to it. And it could be the same thing for Star Wars Outlaw. Point being, people are saying, like, why is the water in a 14-year-old game better than the water in this major thing right now? And it's like, well, they're two different things. One's this big open world thing, and the other thing's a very focused survival horror. Even down to
water.
Right. And even down to the speed that your character, the maximum speed that your character is moving at, is the walk speed of the speed in Outlaws. And people don't understand that, like, video games they're not even like movies, they're bespoke. Like, they pick a thing, if you're smart, and you actually want to ship something, you pick, three things, pick your battles. You pick three things, maybe four. Those are your pillars. And the reason I think three or four makes sense is because what can hold up a table? Three or four, pillars or posts, right? You pick those things and you focus on those things. If you're making a survival horror game on a ship and the ship is sinking, you focus on water because you're interacting with it, right? And you make it the best water ever, right? They can do that because they had that bandwidth. But, Star Wars Outlaws has everything. It has planets. It has like space battle-y stuff. It has, run and gun. It has some stealth. It has a little bit of everything, right? So not all of it's going to be great. It's, it should be good, but it's not all going to be world class. It doesn't really matter how many people and how many years ago something else did something else.
They're
That's
just never going to have enough people. Yeah.
right. And so it's a shame that the gamer doesn't understand it. Like they don't, or at least the
Well, think about
ones.
this too, right? It's not like they don't have the examples either, right? Because you have Grand Theft Auto, San
Right.
Andreas. How
Right.
much stuff could you do in that game, and how good was each individual thing?
Oh yeah.
They're already totally accustomed to it. Even though I know that there is a problem with the gamer audience of today, I also think that it is multiplied by a multifaceted process that allows for the worst voices to percolate to the top.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's probably it. And yeah, the ones with the megaphones screaming the loudest um, seem to be rather angry about everything.
Mhm.
And I kind of like go through, like, I feel like I've crested being in that like mindset, or in that like, yeah, I'm going to be angry, or I'm going to fight against this, or whatever. And I'm hopefully moving on to a space where I kind of like go,
Nice. Better for your health.
Yeah, but like I love to listen to the player, because in my 40 years of doing this, the first whatever 5 was in service of whatever it is I wanted to do, and the gaming was in its infancy, so whatever I wanted to do was whatever anybody wanted. They wanted what I had, and that was that. And then all of a sudden you have some 30 years of AAA development, and during that 30 years for me, um, I've always felt like I should be in service of the gamer, right? My product, my game, my entertainment should be. I always think about the player. Not that I don't now, and not that I didn't before. I'm just saying, like, the 30 years was really focused on that. And so, like, with that, you end up with a kind of personality that's always looking for what people are saying. So for better or for worse, I am always, every single day, I absorb all the praise and the hate of every gamer about every game. I look at what anybody is talking about on any game, indie or AAA, and I absorb it, and sometimes it hits me, even though it's not my game. Um, these things have impact, and I should probably just not care, but I do care. I care about what people, what makes people happy, what makes people sad, right? I want to know. I want to know so that, again, I'm making something that's in service of the gamer, right? I want to know what the trends are, so that if I can incorporate it in what I'm doing, then cool. Or if I'm making something that's just so completely off, I know that too. I want to know what gives people a chubby, what not, and what that means is that I open myself up to just constant vomit of vitriol.
Well, and I don't know if there's a way to completely get away from it, right? Because when we're gonna try to track sort of mainstream trends, the less sophisticated emotional resonance is just a big part of it.
Yeah.
So it's people falling over themselves and people freaking the hell out.
I mean, I'm not 100, like, like I said, I want to make this first person shooter that's very much about positioning and all that. I've got a top down arcadey shooter. I've got or shmup. I've got the platformer and all this stuff. These are not whatever the mainstream trends are. If I was smart, I would have done a vampy survivory thingy 4 years ago when I first saw the thing. Um, but I'm not that smart. I am doing kind of what I want to do, um, and not really trend following. But I do want to know if what I'm doing will resonate, and I do want to see I really want to see new mechanics and things like that. And that's part of the reason I also try to mentor it when I can, is because God, I just want to stop seeing the treadmill and seeing people just run over the same problems, and so they can get on to the next thing. Because at this point in my career, I don't know if I'm going to create the next thing, right? Like, I'm going to create a very refined thing that will give you the feels, because I'm nostalgia mining. Or I guess what people call it, member berries. I plant lots of member berries, right? And that's what I do. Uh, so I don't wake up in the morning going, what thing that no one's ever seen before can I make today? Right? It's just not where I'm at. But I feel like somebody has to do it, and some people are kind of doing it. But I really want to see a lot more people doing that. I want to see a lot more people pushing forward genres that we already have. I want to see people create hybrid genres and I want to see people create things that we've never seen before. Because I really, this, 40 years is a long time. And I don't ever turn this off. Making games, like Tomo said, whenever you talk to Tony, he's always working on something. I don't turn it off. So, because of that, it's important to me that it survive and thrive. And so it bums me out when people, are hostile towards game developers. It bums me out when game developers are just stepping on the same landmines that they don't really have to, but because we have such brain drain in our business, or the classic, new generations don't listen to old generations. I get it. I remember not listening to people, um, but all that really has
I've been
that has to
working on
stop.
that. I've been
You
working
have
on how do you get them to listen? And I mean, I'm in process, or still in progress, but um well, first of all, this is maybe another kind of tangent shift, topic shift, but
what tangents
we
with us?
never
No,
we never listened to anybody before.
no.
So right out the gates, it's totally reasonable to imagine that other people won't listen to us.
Yeah.
And that's what's nice is actually some people will, and it's just a lot easier to talk to them about stuff. Whatever, that's not the problem we're talking about, right? Most people, and especially the people that maybe are carrying almost any amount of ambition, they're not listening, and they're thinking about what's ahead of them, right? So part of the game has to be like, you almost have to pull like a Sherlock Holmes magic trick. You have to take your life experience and the patterns you've seen and start looking ahead on their timeline for stuff they're about to discover.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And then you have to foretell it.
Interesting.
And then now you're like an oracle, right?
Okay, I can do that. Yeah, I could be Morpheus. That could work.
And also just this idea of like, I talk a lot about how I change I'm constantly practicing how to change my mind, and that I just lead with me. If there's a problem, I just talk about how I have the problem, because we all have every problem to some degree, right? And you just leave them to decide on their own whether they're going to deal with their problem, which happens to be exactly the same.
My thing, or my tactic has been, I ask a lot of questions, and I'm evil and sneaky. I don't tell them that I'm asking questions knowing the answer, and that I'm kind of, in some ways, I'm asking them questions because I want them to think about the thing that I perceive they haven't thought about. And so it's always interesting when I'm talking with a game developer about things, and I'm asking them questions, and they are answering and not understanding that I'm really baiting them. But like, it's one of the things. It's one of the ways to get people, because I don't want to tell you what to do. Then all of a sudden I'm your boss or manager or director or some gibberish like that. I want, like I said, I want people to do better. I always said, like, to especially the level designers I would manage, I'm like, I want you to be better than me. I want you to kill me in my sleep. So when I look at the new crop of developers, and some people that have senior in their titles also that are developers, and especially design, I want them to be better than me, because it's going to help further the medium, and it'll give me like people to be, to admire, and I'm a fairly competitive person. I will compete against people I don't even know they're competing against me. Um, and it's, generally it's, it's a friendly thing, but it's a motivation thing for me. So like, if I can teach someone to be a better designer, and then they, stomp a hole in me, then it's like, oh, okay, it's on, cool. Like, it's not, oh, I hate you now because you made a better game. Oh, good, you made a better game. Awesome. Now I got to do better, right? So in a lot of ways, all this kind of altruistic stuff is actually quite selfish. I want the fuel to fuel my fire so that I can be better. Otherwise, I become complacent.
Yeah, I think I feel at least somewhat similar. I definitely feel like there is a slice of the industry which just operates at a very high level, and you get some really, really good stuff. But it's rare to have something like Baldur's Gate 3 where it's firing on so many different cylinders at a super high level. You can look at Destiny 2 is a good example of a lot of things are done really, really well. And still, why do I find myself playing so much of Warframe? Because the progression is a more interesting experience there. Although I hear there's this game called like The Last Redeemer or something, The Last something or other, that's supposedly like sort of a hybrid of Destiny and Warframe.
Really? Oh, The Last Ascendant?
The Last Ascendant, yeah. I'll have to. I mean,
I've yet to play that. I need to play that, but it does look like it looks like a waifu frame Destiny.
Nice.
And so, yeah, I just, it's a time thing. But yeah, that from what I've seen, that speaks to me. I dig the character designs. I dig the kind of art direction, which I think people don't realize that those are two different things. Like the, even just down to the color palette, which is kind of monochromatic, to be honest. A lot of it is just is gray, but little sparks of light here and there. And then yeah, it looks like me. It looks like something that I would be into. I just haven't had the time to get into it. But I'm kind of okay with that.
Yeah, and you probably should play Space Marine 2 first.
Yeah.
Because it's more of like a legit innovation in the gameplay space of a third-person shooter experience.
So yeah, like we were saying earlier, like people are equating it to the simplicity of the Xbox 360 era, as I've heard quoted by multiple channels that I let run in the background while I'm working.
Like they're saying They're saying that the Space Marine game is simple like from that era.
Yeah, and it's
Weird.
I don't know if it is or not. I mean, just
it's a
eyeballing
beast. It's a beast of a game, but although, did you play Space Marine, the first Space Marine?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the gameplay is very similar in that regard. It's some improvements, maybe some frictions. Like the innovations come largely in the form of like sort of the mass scale that it can support, the number of enemies.
The frame rate sure looks a hell of a lot better. First one.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's technologically more sound in its execution.
And the combat, I mean, I haven't touched it, but it. Okay, so it's two things. I haven't touched the combat on the new one, so I'm just going by looks. And in my head, I wasn't fully into the combat of the first one. But also, I gotta realize that at that point, if it wasn't, Devil May Cry or Buffy or Vanquish or Bayonetta, I could care less about how it played. Like it didn't. I was into or God of War. If it wasn't a spectacle fighter, then I was like, yeah. So I remember the combat and everything in the first one being clunky, but I also like that it didn't force me into a lot of cover like Gears, right? It's
not a cover shooter in any way, right?
Right. So that's my memory of the first one.
But I put a good amount of time into that game. I'm a 40K fan, and so at the time I felt that it was the best combination of shooting and melee in any of the games that were available to us. I mean, I wouldn't consider Devil May Cry as shooting and melee. Is part of it too. That would.
Well, you can shoot to juggle.
yeah. When you can shoot.
You can't shoot to kill. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, the new one, like I looked at that and I was like, oh, that looks like money. And that was from one of their initial gameplay teasers, and they showed, kind of you come out to this big atrium and there's just a flood of not Zerg coming, and what are they called? The
Tyrannid.
Tyrannid. God, sorry. It was totally on the tip of my tongue. But
the first Zerg.
Yes, I know. And that's kind of why I said not Zerg, because I think that a lot of people, the same way that they think that Joe Mad and like the Darksider series and all of his games stole the look from World of Warcraft versus it actually being the opposite way, the other way around. I think a lot of people look at Zerg Rush in Space Marines 2 or they look at Space Marines in general and think, oh, it's like Gears but with a sword,
or it's like StarCraft humans. Yeah, it's but yeah, it's nice to see 40K kind of in a better place these days. And then there's the whole Henry Cavill production company thing, which I'm up in the air. I have no idea how it's going to play out. I hope it plays out good. But yeah, Space Marine 2 is a solid game and an interesting, unexpected sort of gameplay shape in an environment where there are a mix of melee and shooting enemies, and that you can mix it up between melee and shooting. And there are some interesting sort of rules in place to kind of recover armor and recover hit points through like executing the kind of bigger enemies. So there's sort of a whole class of sort of cannon fodder enemy, and then there's like a whole class of more serious enemy. And the way you kind of bounce off the two has a big part in the strategies you're going to explore as well. A lot of interesting stuff. Totally should play it. It'll be fun for your brain.
It looks.
Although
like
it is worth noting that I am coming up on the end of my time frame.
Boo.
It always happens in these discussions, but yeah, if we can get together again, I'm sure we have a lot more. I do want to, like, one thing I do want is, because maybe as a top for next time, is the idea of trying to, going back to what Tony was saying earlier about trying to capture someone's time, or the importance of getting someone to invest in a game, because that really goes with the talk that I'm planning for MagWest.
Oh, nice, yeah. that's a big topic, right? And it's one that you could easily roll as like a technical mobile games development engagement conversation,
Mhm.
or you could roll it like I'm trying to have an interesting conversation with someone I just met. You know, there's the and every possible thing in between.
Mhm. All right, but we'll say goodnight here because I don't. We don't want to keep Tomo here all night long. I know you have to get going. So I guess very quickly and to end things, if you guys have anything new to promote, anything like that for people listening, go right ahead.
Like I said, wishlist BPM Boy on Steam. That'll be coming out soon, if not out by the time that we're showing this.
All right, and for you, Tomo, anything new?
Nothing specific. Other than Epic Tavern is still in early access, and we stream development once a week now instead of 3 times a week. It's been a while, and that's about it from on my end.
All right, and for me, for everyone watching, do the YouTubing stuff, check out all the copies of the books, all that great stuff, and I'm sure we'll be back together again for a conversation in the future because there's still so much more we can get into, and we shall see what our next topic will be. So, everybody, once again, thank you for tuning in. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games, and to Tomo and Tony, thank you again for coming on.
Thanks. Always
Thanks
fun to
for having
talk
me.
shop.
All right.
Indeed.
So until our next conversation, everyone, have a great rest of your night.